4:17 a.m. Humboldt County, Nevada. Tuesday, February 11th, 2026. 31 federal agents moved through the pre-dawn dark across a gravel ranch road, the temperature holding at 22 degrees Fahrenheit. No lights. No sirens. 2 Humboldt County Sheriff's vehicles staged a quarter-mile back on Route 95, engines running. The target, a 160-acre west parcel of the Kettleback Ranch, 11 miles outside Winnemucca. The west barn was dark. The ranch house, 300 yards to the east, showed one lit window on the ground floor. Both teams moved simultaneously. What the agents knew at that exact moment, somewhere beneath the barn's tack room floor, behind a sealed concrete door from 1962, 10 young women were still alive. They had been there for 47 days. Not one of them had been reported missing before their families noticed they were gone. And the entire operation had started with a 63-year-old farrier who noticed someone had trimmed a horse wrong. The Kettleback Ranch had existed in Humboldt County since 1914. 4 generations of the Kettleback family ran cow-calf operations on its 1,600 acres, leasing grazing rights on adjacent BLM land, selling at auction in Winnemucca and Elko. The family name was on a small brass plaque inside the county courthouse, a donation acknowledgement from 1988. By fall 2025, the family no longer worked the land directly. The current lessee was Devrin Halsey, 51 years old, originally from Tuella County, Utah. His paperwork described him as an agricultural tourism consultant. His lease agreement, filed with Humboldt County in August 2025, listed his intended use as a working cattle operation, with a quarter-horse breeding sideline and a planned wellness retreat conversion on the west quarter. He paid the first 2 years of lease in full. Cash equivalent, via certified check. County planning records showed a submitted application for a wellness facility permit, a single-page form, no architectural drawings attached. The application had sat in pending queue since September 2025. Nobody had followed up. Halsey was soft-spoken, neighbors said later. He drove a clean, late-model pickup. He greeted people at the feed store in Winnemucca by name within 3 weeks of arriving. He bought hay in bulk, kept the fences maintained, and mentioned the wellness retreat project in passing conversation, the way a man mentions a home renovation, something underway, nothing urgent. The ranch looked like a ranch. That was the point. What Humboldt County had no reason to know was that the west barn sat directly above a sealed concrete blast shelter, poured in 1962 by a previous owner, a rancher named Elford Pruitt. He had spent $40,000 constructing what he described in a letter to his son as a family refuge for the worst that could come. The shelter was 112 feet long, 20 feet wide, divided internally into 12 compartments. It had its own ventilation system, running water from a buried cistern, and a reinforced steel door, accessible from a trapdoor, in the tack room floor. Elford Pruitt died in 1978. His son sold the property in 1983. The shelter passed through 3 subsequent ownership transfers, each time undisclosed, each time unmapped in county records. By the time Halsey signed his lease in August 2025, the shelter existed only in a single typewritten property description buried in a 1983 escrow file at a title company in Lovelock, Nevada. It was not on any current survey. It was not on any county record. It simply wasn't there, as far as any regulatory body knew. Halsey had found it. He had found it specifically. Halsey had not discovered the shelter by accident. The 1983 escrow document had been digitized by a Nevada title company as part of a state archiving project in 2023. The file was technically publicly accessible through a Nevada land records database. Halsey had spent months searching historical rural property records across 4 western states, looking for exactly this: an undisclosed subsurface structure on a large, isolated, legitimately operating agricultural property with an existing lease framework and a reason for vehicles to come and go. He found Kettleback Ranch in late 2024. He signed the lease 8 months later. The recruitment mechanism was polished. Halsey and his associates had built a job listing with a credentialed-looking domain name and a roster of fabricated testimonials, advertising a position called a ranch hand wellness residency. The posting appeared on 2 wellness industry job boards, 1 lifestyle influencer forum, and a niche professional network used by people working in holistic health, veterinary care, and outdoor therapy. The pitch was straightforward: a 3-month paid residency at a working ranch in northern Nevada, room and board included, designed for young women in health-adjacent fields who needed a reset from burnout. Applications required a resume, a short personal statement, and a phone interview. The target profile was deliberate. Young women, working professionals, 22 to 28 years old, in fields that valued self-sufficiency and discretion. Women who would be credible in telling friends and family they were taking a remote work placement. Women whose absence for the first week or 2 might be read as chosen. The lure worked. Between late November 2025 and mid-January 2026, 10 women were recruited, transported to Kettleback Ranch, and confined in the retrofitted blast shelter beneath the West Barn. They came from towns across Nevada, Oregon, and Northern California. A 26-year-old occupational therapist from Medford, Oregon. A 24-year-old agricultural extension worker from Lakeview, Oregon. A 25-year-old pharmacy technician from Redding, California. A 27-year-old physical therapy assistant from Sparks, Nevada. And a 23-year-old veterinary technician from Reno named Daria Ochoa. Daria's mother, Rosa Ochoa, reported her missing to the Washoe County Sheriff's Office on December 9, 2025, 11 days after Daria stopped returning calls. Rosa had a photograph of her daughter taken the previous Thanksgiving, standing in front of a truck with a cattle dog at her feet, squinting against the sun. Rosa printed that photograph at a Walgreens and taped it to cardstock. She drove from Reno to Sacramento and back. She stopped at every gas station, every feed store, every roadside diner on Interstate 80 and US 95. She taped the flyer to every bulletin board she could find. Rosa Ochoa had no idea her daughter was 11 miles from Winnemucca. Nobody did. The other 9 families were in similar positions, each having reported a missing woman to a different law enforcement jurisdiction, each case sitting in a separate database, each investigator working without visibility into the others. A missing persons detective in Medford, Oregon had no reason to connect her case to a Washoe County report filed 6 weeks later. The cases were geographically spread. The victims had no known connection to one another. There was no common denominator visible from the outside. There was one common denominator. Nobody had found it yet. Iker Ozaeta had been shoeing horses in Humboldt County since 1994. He was 63 years old, born in the Basque country of northern Spain, trained as a farrier in Pamplona, before immigrating in his early 20s. He drove a dented white Ford F-250, with a hydraulic stock holder welded to the bed. He had a client list of over 40 ranches across the county and into Pershing County to the south. He worked alone. He first came to Kettleback Ranch in September 2025, hired by Halsey on a monthly rotation to maintain the 8 quarter horses stabled in the West Barn. The horses were well-fed, healthy, unworked in any serious way. Halsey said they were part of the planned breeding program. Iker asked no questions. He did his job. He invoiced. He was paid promptly by check. He returned in October, November, December. Each visit, same 8 horses, same condition. He arrived on May 6, 2026, for his regular monthly call. He tied the first mare, lifted her left forehoof, cleaned it with a pick, and stopped. The hoof had been trimmed since his last visit in April. He checked the angle with a practiced eye, the natural slope of the hoof wall, the breakover point, the way the toe had been shaped. It was technically clean, but it was wrong for a working ranch mare. The toe had been brought forward slightly, the heels left marginally high. It was a cosmetic trim, the kind you saw on show horses. Animals that lived in covered arenas, moved on flat footing, were presented for appearance rather than utility. A working ranch horse needed exactly the opposite: a flatter toe angle, lower heels, a trim that supported work on uneven terrain. Nobody at Kettleback ran horses in shows. Nobody had ordered outside farrier work. Iker had been the only farrier on this property. He checked a second mare. Same thing. 2 horses, same trim pattern, same wrong angle. Iker Ozaeta did not call the sheriff. He did not file a report. He finished his work, invoiced for the visit as normal, and drove to the Humboldt Farm Supply on Malarkey Street in Winnemucca to pick up a box of tungsten carbide nails. Deputy Armand Velasquez was standing at the counter buying fence staples. Iker mentioned it the way a man mentions a curiosity, not with urgency, not with alarm. He said he'd been to Kettleback that morning and found that someone had trimmed the mares since his last visit, done it wrong for working horses, and nobody had told him they'd brought in another farrier. Deputy Velasquez nodded. He knew the ranch. He knew Halsey by sight. He asked Iker one question: what kind of trim? Iker described it: cosmetic, show horse style, the kind of work you'd do if you wanted the horse to look good, but didn't care how it moved. Velasquez went home that night and looked up Devrin Halsey in the county database. The wellness retreat application was still pending. He searched Halsey's name in Nitzik, clean. He ran the ranch address through Humboldt County property records. No anomalies. But one thing about the trim stuck with him. A man converting a ranch to a wellness retreat. A man with no livestock background, no show horse operation, no reason to know what a cosmetic trim looked like, had apparently purchased or borrowed farrier tools and practiced on his own horses in his off time. That was a specific kind of person. And it was odd for a man who presented himself as a tourism consultant. Velasquez sent an email to the Humboldt County Sheriff's Missing Persons Coordinator the next morning. He noted that a Kettleback Ranch lessee named Devrin Halsey had recently moved to the area from Utah with an undisclosed background, and that an anomaly in the ranch's horse care had been flagged by a longtime local farrier. The email was tagged to a missing persons cluster flag that had been placed in the Humboldt County system 3 weeks earlier by a Nevada Department of Public Safety analyst named Carla Reyes. The connection was made the same afternoon. I spent time going through the case timeline, and one detail kept nagging at me: the fact that the missing persons cluster flag already existed before Iker's tip arrived. Carla Reyes had done something that didn't get much attention in the subsequent press coverage, but it was foundational. She had been running a pattern analysis across missing persons reports filed in Nevada, Oregon, and Northern California between November 1, 2025 and April 30, 2026. She was looking for shared demographic characteristics, a voluntary project, outside her assigned caseload, done on her own time in the weeks before Iker's call. She identified a pattern. 8 of the missing women had health industry backgrounds, were between 22 and 28 years old. and had last been in contact with family within a 72-hour window of what appeared to be a voluntary travel decision. 8 cases, 3 states, same profile. Not one cross-jurisdictional alert had been filed. Reyes placed the cluster flag in the Humboldt County system because 3 of the 8 women had last used their phones or credit cards in northern Nevada. When Velasquez's email landed on May 7th, Reyes had the cross-reference completed within 6 hours. The FBI's Salt Lake City field office received the referral on May 8, 2026. The assigned case agent was Special Agent Tomas Farrier, a 15-year veteran with a background in organized crime and federal kidnapping statutes. Farrier reviewed Reyes's cluster analysis that evening. By the following morning, he had opened a federal investigation under Title 18, Kidnapping and Unlawful Restraint Statutes, with parallel review under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. The first problem Farrier faced was the shelter. He had no proof it existed. The 1983 escrow document was found on May 10th by a paralegal in the Salt Lake City field office who spent 4 hours working through the Nevada Land Records database. The document was a 4-page typewritten escrow summary that described, in a single paragraph, a subsurface reinforced concrete structure, approximately 100 linear feet, with mechanical ventilation and independent water supply, accessible via interior hatch, in northwest corner of main outbuilding. It was described as a property feature, not a liability. No permit had been filed for its construction. No county record documented it. It had never appeared on a property survey. The structure was real, on paper, but nobody alive had seen it from the inside. Farrier requested aerial surveillance on May 11th. A fixed-wing aircraft equipped with synthetic aperture radar made 2 passes over the west parcel of Kettleback Ranch at altitude, ostensibly conducting a Bureau of Land Management range survey. The radar return from beneath the west barn showed a subsurface anomaly consistent with a large concrete void, 108 feet long, 18 feet wide, located precisely where the 1983 escrow document said it would be. The shelter was there. Farrier had the anomaly report in his hands on May 13th. He convened a call with the FBI's Salt Lake Host Rescue Team that afternoon. The question was not whether to move. The question was when, and how to do it without triggering a response from Halsey that would put the women in the shelter at greater risk. For 12 days after confirming the shelter existed, the FBI did not move. 12 days with women in a concrete bunker. The reason was this: the FBI did not yet know how Halsey monitored the shelter, what alarm or notification system he had installed, or whether a forced entry on the barn would give him time to seal or compromise the shelter's interior before the entry team reached it. A blast shelter from 1962 was designed to withstand external force. If the internal steel door could be locked from the shelter side, or worse, if it had been modified to be sealed from above, a premature breach could trap everyone inside. The FBI needed a floor plan. They needed to know the interior layout of a structure that had not been documented since 1962. They found it in Elford Pruitt's personal papers. Pruitt was a meticulous man. His son, now 81 years old and living in a retirement community in Henderson, Nevada, had kept a storage unit in Lovelock containing his father's files. An FBI agent drove to Lovelock on May 15th and spent 3 hours in the storage unit. He found, in a manila folder labeled Ranch Construction, a hand-drawn plan of the shelter, dated June 1962. 12 compartments. Internal corridor. Ventilation shafts. Steel door hinged outward into the corridor, meaning it could not be barricaded from inside the compartments. The cistern water supply was fed from above. through a pipe that ran under the barn floor to a buried tank that could be accessed from outside. Hinged outward. That was the critical detail. A door hinged outward into a corridor could be breached by a team moving through that corridor. It could not be held shut from the compartment side. Farrier had what he needed. The operation was named internally Operation Tack Room. The raid date was set for February 11th, 2026, a Tuesday at 4:17 a.m., chosen because surveillance had established that Halsey's 4 associates were all on property and that the ranch was at its lowest activity level in the pre-dawn window. The surveillance itself had taken 9 days to establish. FBI technical surveillance, conducted under federal warrant, had placed audio and thermal monitoring on the barn structure from May 18th onward. The thermal signatures from beneath the barn floor were consistent with multiple human occupants in the shelter. A count of thermal signatures, taken at 4 separate overnight intervals to account for movement and body proximity, consistently returned a figure between 9 and 12. The women were alive. All of them. What strikes me about this investigation is how close it came to collapsing before it began. Not because of anything Halsey did to evade detection, but because the systems that should have caught it earlier simply were not designed to see across state lines at the level Carla Reyes was working. 10 women reported missing across 3 states over 47 days, each report sitting in a separate jurisdiction's database, each file waiting for a cross-referencing process that didn't automatically happen. It took one analyst working off-book on her own time to see the pattern that was staring at everyone. Farrier's second obstacle came on the morning of May 22nd, when the primary audio surveillance unit mounted under the barn's west eave developed a power failure. Its concealed battery depleted 9 days ahead of projected schedule due to temperature fluctuations. The unit went dark at 6:43 a.m. Without audio coverage, the FBI lost its secondary confirmation that the shelter was occupied. The replacement unit could not be placed without physical access to the barn, which would require either a cover approach, posing as a county inspector, a utility worker, something credible, or waiting. Farrier chose a cover approach. A Nevada Department of Agriculture field inspector conducted a routine barn assessment on May 24th, citing a state-level hay storage compliance check following a regional hantavirus advisory. The inspector, working with an FBI technical officer posing as a state agricultural aide, replaced the unit in 11 minutes. Halsey was present for the inspection. He showed them the barn, the hay stores, the horses. He was cooperative. He walked within 20 feet of the trap door. He did not open it. The new unit came online at 2:17 p.m. that same day. Audio returned. The shelter was still occupied. Operation Tack Room's entry team was 22 agents from the FBI Salt Lake Host Rescue Team, supported by 4 U.S. Marshals and 5 Humboldt County Sheriff's deputies, staged on Route 95. A separate 4-agent team was assigned to the ranch house. The breach plan was specific. Team Alpha would enter the west barn through the main doors and the north side access door simultaneously, secure the barn floor, and breach the tack room hatch within 90 seconds of entry. Team Bravo would take the ranch house, securing Halsey and any associates present. No shots were to be fired unless a team member was under direct threat. Halsey had no known history of violence, but one of his 4 associates, a man named Curtis Peel, had served as a rural county deputy in Elko County until 2023, when he resigned under circumstances that were, per a subsequent personnel review, related to an off-duty incident that had not resulted in charges. Peel was considered the highest-risk individual on the property. Farrier's third obstacle materialized at 3:51 a.m., 26 minutes before entry. A secondary surveillance camera positioned on the barn's south fence line, monitoring the approach route, picked up a thermal signature moving from the ranch house toward the west barn. A single figure, moving slowly, no light source. The figure entered the barn through the side door. Someone was in the barn. Farrier had 26 minutes to decide whether to hold the operation, advance the timeline, or proceed as planned and adjust. He made the call in 4 minutes. He advanced the breach on the west barn by 11 minutes while holding Team Bravo on the ranch house until Team Alpha had secured the barn floor and confirmed the tack room hatch status. The ranch house team would move the moment Alpha reported the barn secure, which would mean, at most, a 3 to 4 minute window during which the barn would be taken, while Halsey remained in the ranch house, with potentially one fewer associate than expected. At 4:06 a.m., Team Alpha went through the barn doors. The figure inside the barn was Curtis Peel. He was standing at the tack room entrance, holding a flashlight, apparently inspecting the hatch mechanism. He turned when the doors came open. He did not reach for a weapon. He was on the ground, hands secured, within 8 seconds. At 4:17 a.m., the original scheduled time, Team Bravo hit the ranch house. Halsey was in the kitchen. He was wearing a flannel robe. He was making coffee. He offered no resistance. He said, reportedly, 2 words when the agents came through the door. He said, "All right." The 3 remaining associates were secured in the ranch house within 4 minutes. 1 was asleep. 2 were in the front room with a television on. Team Alpha's breach of the tack room hatch took 61 seconds. The trapdoor was padlocked from above. The padlock was cut with a hydraulic cutter. The steel ladder into the shelter's main corridor was intact and functional. The FBI medical officer on Team Alpha was the first person down the ladder at 4:23 a.m. The corridor was lit by a single string of battery-powered LED lights running along the ceiling. Halsey had installed them. 10 cells, each approximately 9 feet by 7 feet, each secured with a sliding exterior bolt. The cells were numbered in Halsey's own handwriting on pieces of adhesive tape stuck to the concrete wall beside each door. The medical officer moved down the corridor, opening bolts. Each cell held 1 woman. The youngest was Daria Ochoa, 23, Reno, Nevada. She had been in the shelter for 47 days. She was ambulatory. She was dehydrated. She was, per the Humboldt General Hospital admission notes filed the following morning, consistent with prolonged confinement, restricted movement, and inadequate nutrition. She was transported by FBI medical transport to Humboldt General at 5:41 a.m. All 10 women were transported by 6:08 a.m. None of them had been told where they were. Several of them did not know there were others in the shelter. The cells were designed to prevent sound transmission. Each woman had believed, for some or all of their time underground, that she was alone. Most people assume a case like this breaks because someone talks. An associate gets scared, a deal gets offered, someone picks up a phone. The evidence in Operation Tack Room tells a different story. Halsey's organization maintained near-total operational silence for 47 days. No associate broke. No phone call was intercepted that revealed the women's location. The digital trail, the job posting, the recruiter communications, the financial transactions, was carefully constructed to avoid obvious flags. What broke it was a hoof angle on a ranch mare that nobody outside a working farrier would have known was wrong. Halsey had ordered a portable farrier kit from an online agricultural supply retailer in January 2026, a kit designed for small-scale hoof maintenance marketed to hobby farm owners. He watched instructional videos online. He practiced on the mares in the West Barn on weekend evenings, when his associates were off the property. He became, by his own estimation, competent enough to maintain the horses between Iker's monthly visits. He was not competent enough to replicate a working ranch trim. He had learned the mechanics from videos that featured show horses. He had applied a show horse trim to working ranch mares. One wrong angle. Not dramatic. Not visible to anyone without 30 years of professional experience. Iker Ozaeta noticed it and mentioned it to a deputy buying fence staples. That conversation, at a farm supply counter in Winnemucca on May 6, 2026, is the operational origin point of a federal rescue involving the FBI Salt Lake Host Rescue Team, the U.S. Marshals Service, the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, and a Nevada state analyst who had been working the pattern on her own time for weeks. Halsey and his 4 associates, Curtis Peel, and 3 other men identified as Gareth Wolfe, 44, formerly of Reno, Marcus Dunby, 38, of Elko, and a man identified in federal charging documents only by his initials, RT, 31, were transported to the Humboldt County Detention Facility by 7 a.m. on February 11th. Federal charges were filed later that same day in the United States District Court for the District of Nevada, Reno Division. The charging documents ran to 81 pages. Curtis Peel had served as a county deputy for 4 years before his resignation in 2023. That is not incidental context in this case. It is a direct indictment of how law enforcement agencies handle officer separations. Peel resigned under circumstances that were described in internal documentation as an off-duty conduct matter. No charges were filed. No public record was created. He was quietly allowed to walk away from a sworn position, and within 2 years he was operating as the primary security coordinator for a man running a rural captivity operation. The failure to create any public record of the circumstances that ended his career as a deputy is something that deserves to be named directly. The investigation into Halsey's background, conducted by the FBI in the 3 weeks following his arrest, revealed a history that crossed multiple jurisdictions without triggering a single coordinated alert. Halsey had operated 2 prior businesses that bore structural similarities to the Kettleback operation. The first, in Tuella County, Utah, in 2021, was a therapeutic farm residency program that had attracted a state licensing inquiry after 2 participants reported being held beyond their agreed residency period. The inquiry had been closed without action after Halsey dissolved the business entity and relocated. The second, in Malheur County, Oregon, in 2023, was a high desert wellness collective that also attracted local sheriff's attention following a welfare check request from a family whose daughter had stopped communicating. The welfare check had been conducted. The daughter, who was an adult, had confirmed she was present voluntarily, and the matter had been closed. The daughter's name appeared on Halsey's contact list, recovered from his personal phone on the morning of his arrest. What she told FBI investigators when they interviewed her in March 2026 is part of the sealed case record. She was not one of the 10 women recovered from the shelter. Did the system fail these women, or was this the kind of crime designed to slip through the gaps between jurisdictions? The question is not rhetorical. Every element of Halsey's operation was designed to exploit the seam between state databases, between jurisdictions, between the voluntary and involuntary categories that determined whether a missing person case received aggressive follow-up. An adult woman who told her family she was taking a ranch residency was, in every official framework, an adult making a voluntary choice. She was not a missing person until someone said she was. And by the time someone said she was underground. Federal prosecutors filed charges against all 5 defendants on February 11, 2026. The lead charge was federal kidnapping under Title 18, United States Code, Section 1201, applicable because the victims had been transported across state lines prior to confinement. Additional charges included conspiracy to commit kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and wire fraud in relation to the fake recruitment scheme. Halsey faced an additional charge of structuring, related to the pattern of payments he had made to recruit associates and supply the shelter. The charging documents identified a sixth individual, referred to in the indictment as Individual 6, who had administered the job board posting and conducted the initial phone screenings of applicants. Individual 6 had not been located at the time of the raid. As of the date of the last public federal court filing in this case, Individual 6 remained unidentified and at large. The job board that had hosted the fake recruitment listing was a legitimate platform, a small, independently operated wellness industry network with approximately 14,000 registered users. The platform's operators had no knowledge their infrastructure was being used for recruitment. The listing had been removed within hours of the FBI making contact on May 8th. But the platform had no mechanism for identifying who had viewed the listing, who had responded to it, or whether similar postings had appeared and been removed previously. The FBI's digital forensics team, working from Halsey's recovered devices, identified at least 3 prior recruitment cycles in 2023, 2024, and early 2025 that had used similar job board postings on similar platforms. The 2023 and 2024 cycles predated the Kettleback property by 2 years. They were associated with the prior Utah and Oregon operations. How many women had responded to those earlier postings was not established as of the last filed court document. The financial picture was incomplete. Halsey's known assets included the certified check lease payment, a late-model pickup registered to a limited liability company incorporated in Wyoming, and a personal bank account in Utah holding approximately $41,000 at the time of arrest. Federal prosecutors identified an additional shell entity registered in Nevada, through which money had moved in 2024 and 2025, but tracing the full flow of funds from that entity was ongoing as of the filing date. How much money moved through the operation in total? Who provided it? Whether there were investors or clients beyond the 5 men arrested at Kettleback Ranch, those questions remained open. Daria Ochoa was discharged from Humboldt General Hospital on February 14, 2026. Her mother, Rosa, had driven from Reno the morning of the raid after receiving a call from the FBI at 5:52 a.m. She arrived at the hospital before Daria's transport reached the building. She was in the waiting room when Daria came through the door. The other 9 families were notified in sequential calls by FBI Victim Services coordinators between 5:45 and 7:15 a.m. on February 11th. Each family was given a hospital location and a timeline. Each call lasted less than 4 minutes by design. The coordinators had been trained to deliver the information in a specific sequence: alive, location, transport, callback for details. 8 of the 10 families drove to Winnemucca. 2 families, including the family of the Medford, Oregon occupational therapist, could not make the drive in time and were connected by video call from the hospital on February 12th. The 10 women were evaluated over a 3-day period at Humboldt General. All were released within 11 days of admission. Hospital discharge notes, portions of which were incorporated into federal victim impact documentation, recorded across all 10 cases: dehydration requiring IV fluids, vitamin D deficiency consistent with extended absence from sunlight, and musculoskeletal findings consistent with prolonged restricted movement. Each file contained the same clinical language, the same bureaucratic restraint. The restraint in the language is not distance. It is precision. One detail that stayed with me: Going through the case materials, the LED lights Halsey had strung along the shelter corridor. Not a lot of light. The agents described it as dim, functional, the kind of illumination that was enough to move by without being enough to read by. Halsey had installed them to make the space minimally habitable. The fact that he had thought about the lighting, had made that specific practical decision about the comfort of the space, and had still built and operated what he built and operated, that specific combination is something the indictment doesn't quite capture. Halsey's arraignment was held in Reno Federal Court on February 18, 2026. He entered a plea of not guilty on all counts. His court-appointed defense attorney entered a motion challenging the legality of the aerial SAR surveillance, arguing it constituted a warrantless search. The motion was denied by the district court in April 2026. As of July 1, 2026, no trial date had been set. Curtis Peele pleaded not guilty at his arraignment on February 19th. His attorney filed a separate motion arguing that Peele's presence in the barn on the night of the raid was consistent with a security patrol and did not constitute overt participation in the kidnapping. The motion was denied. Peele remained in federal custody. Marcus Dunby, 38, entered into a cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors in March 2026. The terms of that agreement remained sealed. Court observers noted that his defense attorney had approached the U.S. Attorney's Office within 72 hours of the arraignment. Dunby's cooperation had reportedly provided investigators with information relevant to both the prior Utah and Oregon operations and the identity of Individual 6. As of the most recent court filing, Individual 6 had still not been charged. Gareth Wolfe and the man identified as RT both maintained not guilty pleas as of the last available court filing. The Kettleback Ranch lease was terminated by the Kettleback family trustees on February 12, 2026. The West Barn was sealed by court order pending forensic processing. The blast shelter beneath it was examined in full by FBI evidence teams between February 12th and February 22nd. Forensic findings from that examination were incorporated into the federal charging documents under seal. The shelter itself, Elford Pruitt's 1962 construction, built against a threat that never came, remained sealed and intact beneath the West Barn floor as of the last available filing date. No decision had been made regarding its permanent disposition. It was not on any county map. It still isn't. The ranch's 8 quarter horses were transferred to the custody of the Humboldt County Sheriff's Livestock Unit on February 12th and subsequently moved to a county facility outside Winnemucca. Iker Ozaeta was asked, informally, by a Humboldt County deputy if he would assess the horse's condition. He did. He found them in good health. He found that the show horse trims had grown out partially in the 3 months since Halsey had applied them, the hoof walls beginning to resume their natural working angles. He trimmed them correctly. He invoiced the county. The invoice was paid. What the federal case against Halsey and his associates does not resolve, cannot resolve, is the question of how many cycles of recruitment had occurred before Kettleback. Dunby's cooperation agreement pointed backward to 2 prior operations in Utah and Oregon. Both had been closed by local authorities as voluntary residency situations involving adult workers who were present by choice. The FBI's review of those prior operations was ongoing as of the most recent filing. No charges related to those operations had been filed. Whether additional victims from those earlier cycles had been located, identified, or contacted was not publicly established. The FBI's Victim Services file for this case listed 10 women recovered on February 11, 2026. Whether that number was the complete count, across all operations, all cycles, all years, was a question the federal record did not answer. Will another case like this one surface before it gets to 47 days? Or does it take the exact combination of a farrier with 30 years of experience, a state analyst working off-book, and a deputy who happened to ask the right follow-up question? Comment yes or no. The recruitment infrastructure, the job board listings, the fake credentialed domain, the phone screening protocol, had been operational for at least 2 years before Kettleback. The individual referred to as Individual 6, who had administered that infrastructure, remained unidentified. The platforms through which the listings had run had no retroactive visibility into who else might have responded to prior postings. The demand that produced what was found beneath the west barn of the Kettleback Ranch had not been charged, identified, or dismantled. Halsey's operation is documented. 10 women are home. Individual 6 has not been found. The job boards are still